Okay, so I want to talk about something I've been wanting to talk about for a very long time. I'm kind of afraid of actually talking about it because I'm going to be throwing a lot of people under the bus. But I think it's a subject that really needs to be touched upon within the organization because there's a lot of secrets going on, and I think it has to do with a lot of sexual suppression. It's a lot of weird stuff that goes on with witnesses that you may not be privy to because you have to. There's like a level of coolness, right? Like there's coolness where oh, we'll go out to a bar and drink. Some people you can't even do that with, right? And then there's a level of coolness like, oh, their conscience allows them to go to a club, right? But they may not even dance, right? There's a level of coolness of you're in a mix of things. You're at the club, right? Then there's a level of coolness with even your language, the way you speak. Do you curse a lot? you know you know and then there's another level about beyond that where it turns into drug abuse. It turns into what's the terminology, but basically you're wife swapping. You're having threesomes and foursomes. You're going to sex clubs. You're going to massage parlors to get pleasure from the massage therapist. There's a whole another world of witnesses that I haven't seen any of the exjw actually talk about. And I kind of want to talk about this. So, when you grow up as a witness, right, you have the option of getting baptized or not getting baptized. And usually that happens somewhere around high school, college, where people either decide they want to be a witness or they do not want to be a witness, right? So that happens at every Kingdom Hall. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, you'll see rotation of young people. Either they're going to stay or they're not going to stay. For some reason, and I'm calling out specifically this area because that is the area that I grew up in, was the Northeast, right? So when you live by a city, you have so much more freedom because you have access to public transportation. Also, when you live in a city, you can hide your sins a lot more easier because it's a big city and it's not a small town where everyone knows each other. Number three, living near the city, there's a high concentration of people, and there's a high concentration of Jehovah's Witnesses, right? I find that the areas that have a lot of witnesses seem to be an area more tainted by this lifestyle. So when I talk about the Northeast, I'm talking about New York City. I'm talking about Philadelphia. I'm talking about DC. I'm talking about Baltimore. Maybe even Atlantic City and some area. I don't know necessarily anywhere specifically in Connecticut, but we're just gonna say Connecticut as a whole because it's not too far from New York City. All right. So you have these witnesses in that area, right? Having parties on a regular basis. There would be maybe a couple of brothers that would take the lead and have these get-togethers. And these get-togethers are all about, finding a spouse, basically. There's people from DC will go to New York, or people from New York will go all the way to DC to go see, go to these parties, stay up all night, then turn around and go to the meeting the next day. So, I could literally be in a party in New York, which was full of witnesses, whether it be a poetry party or just a party, a formal, or just a party where everyone's getting drunk, or a house party. Stay up there at 4 a.m, turn around drive back to my house, and then go and to my 12 o'clock meeting, because ain't nobody was waking up at 9. We'll just go to our friends meeting, and we'll just go to the 12 or the 3 o'clock, but that was a lifestyle, that was the thing. That's what people did if you lived in the Northeast. And it was a lot of us. And I know it was a lot of us because there used to be a brother from Philly. He used to host beach days at Island State Beach Park, and there would be 500 of us on the beach. 500 young Jehovah's Witnesses, all under the age of 30, on the beach. That's a whole nother video and topic that I can address, but I'm just going to talking about the secrets. And from the stories that I hear from ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, they talk about, most of the people in the hall, they were fine, and how active they were within the congregation, they were pioneers or servants or elders or whatever, so some of them may not have been privy to the other things that were going on within the organization. Now, I would say witness life living in a city or around a city is completely different than coming from the suburbs. They're totally different personalities. They're totally different conscious levels. They're completely different people. So let's just talk about sexual frustration in general and marriage. So you're encouraged as a Jehovah's Witness to get married super young, I just remember people just pushing these guys on me, and I really just wasn't interested. I remember, one guy, someone tried to push me. He didn't finish college, high school. He didn't even finish high school, and she was really trying to connect me with him. He needs at least a GED. He didn't even have a GED, but because he was a servant on his way to be an elder, she wanted me to be with him. And it was ugh. Another guy, he was very feminine. I think he was gay, low key, but I was I'm not interested in metrosexuals. I would like my man to be a masculine man. That's just my opinion, my preference, and I didn't want to have to worry about marrying somebody that was on a down low, and he just gave me that energy that he was low-key into men. So I didn't want to be with him. And I was just really very specific. I convinced myself that I wasn't just going to marry anyone, and I wanted to marry someone that I actually loved. I didn't want to marry someone because they were the elder or a servant. And a lot of times within this community, I see people discovering that this is not the truth, and then they tell their spouse, and their spouse is like, oh, I don't want to be with you. That's usually because they married you off of your spirituality and the things you wanted to do within an organization. And then once those things got taken away, then they're like, well, I don't really like you. Well, guess what? They never really liked you in the first place. I married my husband because I was like, if he was not a Jehovah's Witness, would I still love him? Because spirituality comes and go. As you can see, I went from a pioneer when my husband met me to, not even wanting to be a witness anymore. But at the end of the day, he loves me for me, and, we still have a marriage. But not everyone does that. No one thinks on that level. I don't understand why. People got they went in on me when I dated him before he was baptized, but I'm like, I love him as an individual. And see, the problem with that is that, number two, people marry people to have sex with them, right? So now he's a servant, and now you marry this person, and I'm speaking from a female perspective. Now he's a servant or on his way to being an elder, and then, he's marrying you because he's horny, right? And he doesn't want to sin against God. So, y'all get together, y'all get married, and then the sex be trash. Either one, like I mentioned before, I had girlfriends that were afraid to have sex, or men. I've had girlfriends tell me that their husbands didn't sexually satisfy them. And now they're in this relationship, and they're supposed to be upstanding within a congregation because he has some type of spiritual accolades. She has all these spiritual accolades, and they're miserable. And this is how the organization creates this problem that I'm going to talk about, which is swinging. You vet people out and you see how they behave in certain situations. You put them in uncomfortable witness situations, but if they handle it, then you bring them to the next level. So it would be like, it would start with the drinking, and then it would start with like the house parties, and then, you know, the erotic dancing, you know, grinding on each other, whatever, you know. Then after that, if they're cool with that, you bring them to the club, right? You bring them to the club, and then you're not only dancing erotically with witnesses, you're dancing on non-witnesses now, right? Then it goes to, okay, what am I going to expose this person to? Then you start, you know, getting numbers from really people, and you do it in front of the other person to see if they react. If they don't react, then that's when the doors open and you have the potential to see some interesting stuff. You know, when I got married, I went through that vetting process, and I was like, all right, whatever. I'm not gonna say anything. I'm just gonna, you know, watch them do whatever they want to do. If they want to get drunk, or if they want to go get this girl's phone number, I'm minding my business. I'm staying out of it. Anybody has time to be at a B school every other day, every other weekend, because you see something crazy. Like, I'm not doing that. I don't want to be a part of that. And then, you know, once you report somebody, you're totally cut off from any type of association with other younger people. And if your whole district is all doing the same thing, and they're all, you know, going to clubs and drinking, and, you know, you don't want to be the only person not invited, or the only person that can't hang out with the other young people because I have this reputation of telling on people, you know. So you just go along with the flow, and you, even if you're uncomfortable in certain things, you just keep your mouth shut, because the only other choice is to not hang out with them, not hang out with anybody your age, and, you know, basically just hang out with all the old people in the congregation, or the people that are socially awkward, because there's a handful of those in every kingdom hall too, right? The brothers, they have basketball teams and they have football teams, and they all link up. And sometimes they come to Atlanta, they go to New York, they go all these states to link up, you know, with other brothers from different cities, and they go play these basketball games, you know. Now, some of these brothers are married, right? And the thing about witnesses, when they are young and they get married for sex. So what I was introduced to and rejected because that's just not the way that I go. But I got so deep in the entanglements I got so deep into it that people were exposing, not physically exposing, but like showing me and showing me and welcoming me into that world, right? But deep down in my soul, like I was a pioneer. And I'm gonna do another video about how I even became a worldly witness, because I feel like I was forced into it. Not necessarily I wanted to ever be that person, but we'll have another conversation about that. But okay, so they have these tournaments. My husband will never want to be a part of it, and I never understood why until later. So basically, these football tournaments and these basketball tournaments were ways for either other couples or other people to meet. And what the couples would do, they would swap spouses. So they would have sex with each other, right? At these Jehovah Witnesses events. And there's nobody... I was always waiting like to find a video about someone talking about this, but I guess it's still a secret. I don't know. But they are literally swapping spouses. They're literally having sex with each other's spouses. You know? And it's a whole ring of it. It's not like, oh, just one person just like... And then when the story comes out, you know, and you find out, oh, so-and-so cheated on so-and-so with another person, it's always just, them just talking about this two individuals. They're not talking about it being a lifestyle. They're not talking about that all the witnesses do it. And I don't want to say all the witnesses are aware of it. Let's say that. They're the ones that participate in those events, the ones that participate in the basketball events, the football events, they're all aware that people are sleeping around. It was to the point that I was talking to one of my girlfriends. She was like, oh, I had sex with every boy on that football team. I'm like, excuse me? And then her other friend was like, yeah, I had sex with all of them too. I'm like, what? I'm like, all right. I know I give the appearance that I'm a cool Jehovah's Witness, but I'm not this cool. Like, are you serious? He was like, yeah, they're all cheating on their spouses. That's just the thing. Like, all of them cheat. And I'm like, wow. So this was like later, like after I've been married. And the thing is, they were trying to get me and my husband to get involved in that. I'm like, and my husband his intuition is so much more better than mine, because I'm like, oh, let's hang out with this couple, and he'd be like, no. And I'm like, but why? Like, I want us to have more, witness couples. He was like, not them. And I'm like, but I just think he was being a prude. I was just thinking he was being a prude. But they were trying to, like, initiate us into that circle. They would be, because I kind of, like, I married my husband outside of a circle that I normally hang out with. So my circle, they knew what I was comfortable with and what I wasn't comfortable with. But my husband wasn't even in that circle. And that's why, I don't know, I feel like our relationship caused a rift, like, within the fabric of the young people sometimes, because the way people talked about me at the time and talked about our relationship, it was almost like, why y'all together? You're like, y'all guys come from two different classes, two different circles of people, which is true. Like, I didn't like any of his friends. I just didn't like any of his Jehovah's Witness friends. I like his worldly friends, but I don't like his Jehovah's Witness friends. And he didn't like any of my Jehovah's Witness friends for good reason. At that time, I'm like, not even seeing or understanding where he was coming from, because I'm like, oh, they're good people. But they weren't, because they were trying to get us into whatever sexual situation that they were in. And the sad part is, when I got in that situation where, if you watch my first video, I talk about, me getting in trouble and almost being disfellowship, I had basically, I didn't tell the elders about, the football teams and the basketball teams, them, swapping wives and having sex with everyone. And, I didn't say any of that. I just, told my thing. But because I hung out with some of those people and I didn't actually know to the extent of what they were doing, I got linked up with all of that. So when everything came out and people were getting disfellowship left and right for things that I had no idea that was going on, my name just got added all into that. So when I said circuits from Connecticut to Baltimore, is Baltimore further than DC? From Connecticut to the DMV, people knew some of my business and assumed some other things that never actually happened. It's because of the football teams. It was because of the basketball teams. Because, because of those things, and witnesses run their mouth, and then make up stories because they just plain don't like you. My name gets dragged in the mud. And then at that point, I was like, you know what? I just don't want to be associated with this group. It's bad enough that I was even participating in the hypocrisy. Like, think about it. Like, we're going door to door Saturday morning. Friday night, they'll have a football game. Friday afternoon, they'll have a football game. Friday night, they're trading spouses. They're having sex with each other's spouses. This is why they didn't tell me what they were doing until late in the game. Like, they were doing this the whole time and I didn't even know it. I didn't know they were trading spouses. And I had just gotten married and they were trying to add me into that. I don't, like, no. I'm not giving you my husband. I'm not doing that. I'm cool, but I ain't that cool. And then that's where I reached my limit, because I'm like, y'all guys are worse than my worldly friends. My worldly friends are not doing this crap. This is out of control. And it happens in the Northeast. I mean, it should be the home in my head. I'm like, the home of Jehovah, because Bethel is right there. No, it's not. These are some sexually frustrated people. And they're out of control. It's the football games. It's the basketball. It's those group activities, you know? And there's so many witnesses in that area. It's like, you can't stop it at this point. It's just a lifestyle. That's what they do. You know? There's always going to be someone having sex with somebody on the side. So, yeah. It's just... it's just terrible. It's just a terrible situation. So, that is it for this video. Just be careful. Be careful out there, especially if you're, still actively hanging out with witnesses. Just be careful, especially, in that area, because they will try to take your wife. They'll try to take your husband.